For Lauren Phelps, life had really just begun when she married the love of her life, Matthew Phelps, in 2016. The two were deeply involved in their local Baptist church, with Lauren being a Sunday school teacher and Matthew being a church minister. But in the fall of 2017, their lives would forever be changed. In the middle of the night, a crime of unspeakable proportions took place in the Phelps household, a crime that Lauren, unfortunately, wouldn't survive. When Matthew phoned 911 to report the crime to investigators, the statements he gave were haunting, confusing, and unlike anything investigators would have expected. Unfortunately, this is one of those cases where we don't have a lot of backstory. I'm not sure if the family of Lauren and Matthew wanted to maintain their privacy after the crime, or if it's simply that reporters didn't have too many interviews with the family. But the early lives of both Lauren and Matthew are largely a mystery. Oddly enough, most of the information I have been able to find about the couple comes from Instagram, of all places. I was able to find out that Lauren was involved with a company known as Scentsy. Scentsy is a service pretty similar to Avon and countless other programs where you can sign up on their website to sell products in exchange for a small commission. Scentsy in particular deals in fragrances such as wax warmers and candles, and they're not a sponsor, by the way. The best I can tell, Scentsy seems like it may just be another pyramid scheme, but I don't know enough about the company to say that for sure. It's just the impression that they give. But anyway, Lauren teamed up with Scentsy sometime in 2015 or 2016, and it seems as though she was doing quite well. She received a few awards during her time working for the company, and everything seemed to be working out great for her. As far as I can tell, the work that Lauren was able to do with Scentsy allowed her to maintain a stay-at-home lifestyle while her boyfriend and soon-to-be husband was attending schooling and training to become a pastor at the couple's Baptist church. For those of you that may not know much about the Baptist church, and I'll be the first to admit, I don't know much about the Baptist faith either, a pastor is someone who leads church services, gives sermons, and even counsels members from time to time. In a non-denominational church, which is what I'm more familiar with, a pastor is more akin to an elder, or rather someone who makes decisions about the church's donations and outreach projects and the overall directions of the church. But in the Baptist faith, this isn't really the case typically. It appears as though Lauren met Matthew sometime in mid-2014. The first mention of Matthew on Lauren's social media was in the fall of that year, and the two seemed to have hit it off immediately, officially becoming a couple in November of 2014. Matthew and Lauren seemed to have been great for one another, and all of Lauren's family members agree, saying that the two seemed destined to be together, with Matthew being a very honest, clean-cut guy. It seemed that, for Lauren, the stars were finally aligning, and she'd found the one that she'd been looking for all this time. Matthew allowed Lauren to be herself, and he loved her for it. We don't know if Lauren had any ambitions of college or a long-term career path, but we know that once she met Matthew, her life began to change for the better. She became even more deeply involved with her local church, and when Matthew announced that he wanted to begin studying to become a pastor, Lauren was more than happy to support him. After dating for just under 2 years, the two got engaged on Valentine's Day in 2016, and they would get married later on that year. According to social media, the two were beyond happy together. In fact, their lives seemed to be perfect. But you always have to remember, social media is only a slight glimpse into the lives that people are actually living. As it would turn out, no sooner than their marriage had begun, it had begun to fall apart. According to Lauren's family, despite how happy Lauren may have seemed, she was miserable, and most of this misery stemmed from her new husband, Matthew. As it would turn out, Matthew wasn't at all the man that he claimed to be. You would never guess it, but Lauren and Matthew were walking on very thin ice from the moment they got married. I'm sure most of us already know that when you marry someone, typically you combine finances. I know there are certain couples out there that don't do this, but more often than not, couples share everything with one another, including their money. This is where things began to cause trouble for the Phelps household, though. See, when they were single, everything was working out great between Matthew and Lauren. After all, they each had control over their own lives, and they were able to share only what they felt comfortable sharing with one another. But now that they were married, they more or less felt obligated to share every little detail with one another. And that's when Lauren began to make a few discoveries about Matthew that she never would have expected. After living together for a few short months, Lauren began to realize that Matthew had a serious problem with money. We don't know for sure just how deep the rabbit hole really goes, but according to Lauren's family and friends, Matthew was spending like he was a member of Congress. But in reality, his income was virtually nothing. At least it was nothing compared to the amount that he was spending. It's pretty safe to assume that Matthew was likely in a lot of debt, but I haven't been able to confirm this for certain, so don't take that as fact. But according to Lauren's peers, Matthew was living a lifestyle that simply wasn't sustainable, no matter how you looked at it. This naturally caused serious problems in the couple's relationship, and Lauren was at wit's end no sooner than their marriage had begun. Lauren was known for being a very resourceful, honest, and caring person about how she lived her life. Matthew, on the other hand, was a bit more rambunctious and careless. Lauren had spoken with him time and time again about the sheer amount of money that he was spending, and Matthew seems to have made every attempt to cut down on his spending, but he just couldn't shake the habit. After all, for some people, buying things can be an addiction, even a way to hide their pain and discomfort in various aspects of their lives. And this certainly seems to have been true for Matthew. Matthew was unhappy with his life. On the surface, he had everything: a beautiful wife, a fulfilling job, a nice car, everything most people would ever aspire to have. But that just wasn't enough for him. Lauren grew so concerned about Matthew's spending habits that she began limiting access that he had to their bank accounts. But even this didn't seem to work, as he'd always find ways around Lauren's safeguards. This led to one argument after another, and before they knew it, both Lauren and Matthew were at wit's end with one another. Lauren seems to have been set on working out whatever flaws the couple had, but she could only take so much. In mid-2017, Lauren had been speaking with a few of her friends about Matthew, and she began to fear that their relationship wasn't going to work out. No matter what she did, she felt like Matthew wasn't willing to cut back on his spending. And if the couple were ever going to start a family together, big changes would need to be made, but Matthew wasn't willing to make these changes. To top this off, Lauren had begun to suspect that Matthew was being unfaithful, but she couldn't prove anything just yet. At this point, it was more of just a gut feeling than anything else. Lauren did her best to see past Matthew's flaws, but they were becoming too large to ignore, and it was causing their lives to spiral out of control. While Lauren was obsessed with things like her cute outfits, Star Wars, dogs, and children, Matthew's priorities were elsewhere. See, Matthew wasn't the man that he portrayed himself to be. Matthew had a dark side. Contrary to Lauren's more lighthearted interests and hobbies, Matthew seemed to have had an affinity for horror movies and the macabre, particularly the movie American Psycho. If you've never seen the movie, a quick rundown is that the main character, Patrick Bateman, is an investment banker who lives a double life as a serial killer. According to Matthew's friends, he was truly obsessed with the film to a concerning degree. He even dressed up as some of the characters from the film on holidays from time to time. But things got much darker and much more concerning when Matthew was casually talking with one of his friends over drinks one day. This friend says that, seemingly unprovoked, Matthew brought up serial killers. But not only this, he confessed that he often wondered what it would be like to claim someone's life. Now, I'm sure this is a thought that's crossed all of our minds at some point in our lives, but Matthew seemed strangely curious. This wasn't just a passing thought for him. The friend said that he could tell there was a strange energy that encompassed Matthew as he pondered the thought of this. It wasn't too long after this that tragedy struck. It was September 1st, 2017. The Phelps couple were happily asleep in their apartment, and it was, by all means, a night like any other. The two had turned in for the evening and went to bed as they always did, but at some point in the middle of the night, Matthew was haunted by twisted dreams that he couldn't seem to shake off. Matthew had actually revealed that he struggled to sleep most nights. This led him to go to various means to try to get some rest, oftentimes relying on over-the-counter medications to get to sleep, though there are some rumors that he may have been involved in much harder substances as well. On this particular night, Matthew had taken a high dose of cough medicine, as he'd heard from a friend that it was the easiest way to turn in for the night. But one of the side effects of this medicine is that it can cause some rather wild dreams, and Matthew was experiencing this firsthand. He never revealed specifically what these crazy dreams were about, but they were so disturbing that he eventually got out of bed to clear his mind for a bit, trying to calm down. As he crept out of bed, he stumbled over to the bedroom doorway and turned on the light. But when he turned to face the room, he couldn't believe his eyes. At first, he thought he was still dreaming, but he quickly realized this was no dream, this was real life. When he turned around, Matthew found Lauren lying on the floor, the entire bedroom covered in red stains. On the bed, he noticed a knife, and when he looked down at his clothing, he noticed he was covered in red from head to toe. Unsure of what to do, Matthew did the only sensible thing and called the police. After dialing 911, Matthew made a truly disturbing revelation to the dispatcher. As he spoke with the 911 operator, he explained that he had a terrible dream, but when he turned the lights on, he found his wife on the floor. He followed this by saying, "I think I killed my," and then he trailed off. The dispatcher began desperately asking how something like this could have happened, but all Matthew could do was describe the scene of the crime. He was very clearly in shock by what had taken place. All he was able to explain was that he had taken a large amount of cough syrup, then woke up to the scene of a crime. As the call came to an end, Matthew began sobbing, saying that his wife didn't deserve this. But Matthew's shock wouldn't last for very long. As investigators later made their way to the scene of the crime to collect whatever evidence they could, they realized a particular aspect of the crime scene didn't make any sense. When they arrived to speak with Matthew, they realized that he was strangely clean. Even though he had told the dispatcher he was covered in red stains, they found he was in pretty good shape for someone who had just woken up to a crime scene. It didn't take detectives long at all to prove that Matthew had, in fact, cleaned up long before the 911 call. Now, I don't know about you, but if I awoke to find my wife on the floor in a bedroom covered from floor to ceiling in evidence, I don't think taking a shower would be the first thing on my mind, and police picked up on this clue immediately. All throughout his interrogation and interviews with police, Matthew maintained his story. Each time he was asked, he'd say the same thing. He took a much larger dose of cough medicine than he should have, and then he went to bed and woke up to the scene of a crime. Police didn't have any evidence to prove otherwise, outside of the strange fact that he had cleaned up before calling 911, but this isn't a crime by any means, it's just weird. But while Matthew had initially maintained his innocence during the investigation, he would soon make a bizarre confession that took everyone by surprise. At this point, investigators were unsure of what to believe. The evidence told a clear story of what had taken place that evening, but the account that Matthew had given made an equal amount of sense, at least to a certain point. Matthew claimed he was under the influence of cough syrup when the crime occurred, and this appeared to have been true. But the manufacturer of the cough syrup in question explained that in their countless years of research, they found zero evidence that could link the medication to violence. Police were highly suspicious, but they weren't able to prove much of anything, at least not yet. As his trial was underway, Matthew was speaking with the judge who would be overseeing his case. As he spoke with the judge, Matthew's demeanor began to change. Up to this point, Matthew had shown no signs of remorse. In fact, when investigators spoke with him at the scene of the crime, they noted that he showed no significant signs of emotion, claiming he didn't even shed real tears. But as he spoke with the judge, Matthew underwent a major shift and actually admitted to the crime. He told his side of the story, and he opened up about the possibility of being responsible for the crime. Then, just a few brief moments later, he more or less confessed the cough syrup probably had nothing to do with his actions that evening. The judge asked, "Are you admitting guilt?" And Matthew agreed. Some prosecutors believe Matthew only did this as a way to avoid the death penalty, while others believe he really was beginning to show signs of remorse. It's difficult to say one way or the other, if I'm being honest, but this is nowhere near the end of the story, and things would only get worse for Matthew from here. As the case was still undergoing investigation and the trial was underway, detectives managed to track down multiple social media accounts that Matthew owned. He had two Instagram accounts, one titled Marty Radical and another titled Uncanny Maddie. On his Marty Radical page, Matthew almost exclusively posted screenshots and quotes from the film American Psycho. This account has since been set to private, so I can't confirm any of the specific posts that Matthew made, but the profile image from this account is still visible, and it's an image of Christian Bale from the film covered in red spatter, so it's pretty safe to say that the allegations there are most likely true. As for Matthew's other account, well, let's just say that his bio didn't age well. The only part of this page that is still visible is the message in his bio that reads, "I'm just a pitiful anonymous, drifting into the abstract. I can't seem to tell if I'm dreaming anymore." Police have made a few bold suggestions, claiming that Matthew was so fascinated with American Psycho and so frustrated with his wife for trying to control their finances and threatening divorce that he snapped. In a fit of rage, they claimed that he enacted one of his favorite scenes from American Psycho, inflicting more than 120 individual wounds on his wife, then taking the time to clean himself up before ever calling the police. While Matthew has never admitted directly to all of these allegations, I don't think it would be much of a stretch to assume that investigators are probably correct in these assumptions. In the aftermath of the crime, Lauren's family has spoken out about the case, and Lauren's father has expressed regret over the last few weeks of Lauren's life. He mentioned that just a few weeks before his daughter lost her life, he noticed that her demeanor had changed. She seemed paranoid, afraid, and worried about something. He regrets that he didn't question her further about this, and he believes that this may allude to Matthew's crime having been premeditated, and Lauren may have felt that something bad was about to happen. To make matters even worse, Lauren also learned that Matthew had been cheating on her. Lauren's sister says that she spoke with Lauren just hours before the crime unfolded, and she discovered that Lauren and Matthew had been arguing about Matthew's alleged affair, after Lauren had witnessed her husband sneaking out of the house to be with another woman. Lauren's sister believes that the two were most likely revisiting this argument when Matthew lost his temper and began attacking Lauren, but this has never been proven, though it would certainly make sense. We may never know for sure, but Lauren's family has been beyond heartbroken by the entire situation, though I'm sure that really goes without saying at this point. Lauren's mother describes Matthew as a master manipulator, also believing the crime was premeditated for months before it took place, though in all honesty, I've found no reason to believe that this is true. According to Lauren's mother, police allegedly told her that most of Lauren's wounds had also come from behind, and they have reason to believe that he had knocked her to the ground, sat on top of her, and inflicted most of the wounds while she was defenseless against him. In response, Lauren's father said, "I think about it every day. What I did wrong, what I missed. Till this day, I just regret not knowing or keeping my eyes open and watching. I took everything as it was." When asked about the possibility of forgiving Matthew one day, Lauren's father replied, "No, I'll take it to my grave and I'll still hate him." In the end, Matthew was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Now, I can already tell that a few select people watching this video are going to run to the comments and start ranting about how this Christian man killed his wife. Let me just tell you, Matthew was not a Christian man. Matthew was a fraud, a joke even. In fact, one of his social media accounts didn't even describe himself as being a pastor or even a pastor in training. It described him as an entrepreneur. Christianity is about living up to the example that Christ set for his people, helping those who are less fortunate, loving our neighbors, and being in the world but not of the world, and following the very simple commands that God has given to his followers. Matthew was none of those things. Matthew was a hateful man who turned his back on religion a long time ago. He is not representative of any Christian I've ever met, and it pains me to have even mentioned him in the context of being a minister of God's word. He's nothing but a wolf in a sheep's den, and Matthew got exactly what he deserved. But in the real world of Christianity, as painful as it may be to hear at times, there's always a possibility of redemption, and I certainly hope that before his life is over, Matthew is able to truly turn his life around and realize the pain and the grief that he's inflicted on so many innocent people, and maybe even turn himself around before it's too late. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. If you want to see more true crime documentaries like this, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, the best way you can do that is simply by leaving a comment below, any comment at all. It helps out the channel a lot more than you may realize. If you want to help out financially, you can do that by clicking the blue join button below or by picking up a True Crime Stories mug from tieknots.com. But with that, my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Trust is a very complex virtue. It's one of the most precious gifts you can offer someone, your trust. But what happens when that gift is broken? And worse yet, by the very person you feel the safest being around. Well, 17-year-old Bernadette Walker confided in someone very close to her about a horrendous occurrence. But instead of supporting her, this person betrayed her. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because the very next day, on July 18th of 2020, Bernadette just vanished. The case of Bernadette Walker is not only frightening, but also makes you question who you can really trust, because Bernadette asked her close family for help, and they offered none, and instead, they turned their backs on her. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If you're new here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts. I post new true crime documentaries multiple times a week, so be sure to hit that subscribe button. It's totally free and keeps you up to date with all of my latest cases. There's no overblown drama, not too many crazy opinions, just true crime. Bernadette Walker was born on December 13th of 2002, and today's case takes place in Peterborough, Cambridgeshire in England. Bernadette's mother, Sarah Louise, at some point after Bernadette was born, decided to part ways with her biological father, but we don't really know anything about what happened between the two of them. Bernadette was known to her family and friends as B, and while she was a bit shy around new people within her circle, she was described as a fun-loving, bubbly, and all-around fun person to be with. B was fond of art, particularly photography. Her camera was with her everywhere she went. And this was why, after graduating high school, B enrolled in Peterborough College, where she was studying photography. B also had big dreams of moving out of her hometown of Peterborough and settling in the United States after school. Like any other teenager, she also loved social media. Because of her shy and introverted nature, she preferred to interact with her friends online. B also loved to knit, and this was something that she learned from her grandmother. The two shared a very close bond, and B was overall very close with her family. Every single person who knew B saw her as a gentle, kind, and expressive person who just wanted to chase her dreams. When B was just a toddler, her mom Sarah met a man named Scott Walker. Sarah and Scott were actually neighbors. She moved next door to him in 2006, with 5 kids while being heavily pregnant with her 6th child. That's a lot of kids, so you can imagine the chaos that must have been B's home life. Her mother Sarah was also raising all of these kids alone. See, after things didn't work out between Sarah and B's biological father, she bounced around from one relationship to another and never really found anyone that she was willing to settle down with. This led to Sarah's 6 children, each having different fathers. The thing is, Scott, Sarah's new neighbor, was married at the time that B, Sarah, and the kids moved in next door. Scott and his wife Jill actually met in August of 2004 when she was a single mother of 2 teenage boys. So they've been together for about 2 years at this point. Initially, Jill thought that Scott was a very loving and thoughtful man, and the relationship moved fast. In less than 2 months, Scott moved in with Jill and her sons. But this was when Jill noticed a complete and alarming shift in Scott's personality. He became obsessive, controlling, and always wanted to know whether Jill was cheating on him with another man or not. According to Jill, this all came out of nowhere and was completely unexpected. Scott was very manipulative. Even though Jill claimed he never physically abused her, during a heated argument he made some very frightening threats, and let's be honest, sometimes a voice can be a lot more damaging than a fist. All of this made Jill feel very hopeless. She quickly became a victim of Scott's cruel abuse, but she couldn't fathom the thought of leaving him. In fact, they stayed together for 10 months, after which Scott asked Jill to marry him, which was as shocking to Jill as it probably was for you to hear. But sadly, because Jill was trapped and driven into a corner of abuse by Scott, she felt she had no choice but to say yes. Now, I don't know if Jill thought that maybe getting married might make things better, or if she truly was just being ruled by fear, but this was so heartbreaking to find out. The couple finally married in 2005, and things only worsened from that point on. Scott was very demanding and selfish, and his behavior was completely inexcusable. It became clear to Jill very early on in their marriage that Scott didn't have any respect for her whatsoever, only demands. This went on for some time until Scott set his sights on his new neighbor, Sarah Louise. Jill would constantly witness her husband flirting with Sarah. But Jill wasn't heartbroken or tormented over Scott's infidelity. Jill, as morbid as it may sound, wanted Sarah to have Scott so that she could free herself from the clutches of his abusive and emotionally manipulative personality. Seeing him buttering up Sarah, it brought her immense joy. Jill saw this as a way out, and she, with the help of a friend, packed her bags and left Scott, and even served him with a protective order that forbade him from being near her. Well, Scott didn't mind Jill's departure one bit, as he quickly dove headfirst into a whirlwind of a relationship with Sarah. Bea was still a toddler at this point, and she looked up to Scott and even called him Dad, which is so heartbreaking knowing what's going to happen later on. Even though Sarah and Scott weren't legally married, Sarah changed her and all of her children's last names to Walker. This makes it so clear just how serious Sarah was about this new relationship. Sarah and Scott also went on to have 4 children of their own. And if you're not great at math, that's 10 kids living under one roof in a house with only 5 bedrooms. It's safe to say that there were a lot of people and a lot of opinions in this home. Sarah worked in geriatrics, whereas Scott would jump from one odd job to another. Although one thing is for sure, Scott loved to brag on social media. He was always building himself up on social media, making himself to be something he's not. But things were far from perfect inside the Walker home. And in fact, they were toxic to the max. One of Bea's brothers, Anthony, came out and claimed that Scott was physically and verbally abusive to everyone in the family. Anthony also went on to say that Scott was unfaithful to Sarah and that he'd had multiple affairs with a variety of women. Anthony also disclosed another disturbing detail about Scott. He had set up cameras in every room of the house, including the family bathroom. Let that sink in for just a bit. There are 10 children in the house, and Scott has cameras in the bathroom. In Scott's defense, the cameras were allegedly for catching Bea red-handed, as she apparently hid candy wrappers in toilet paper rolls. But I can't help but think that things are about to get a lot worse. It was July of 2020, and things in the Walker household weren't getting any better. Scott was now 50 years old. Sarah was 37, having just given birth to a baby girl in June, and by now Bea was 17 years old. Sarah, finally fed up with Scott's manipulation and behavior, was also ready for some change. Scott and Sarah had now broken up, and Sarah was actually seeing another man named Chris O'Connell. But there was something very bizarre about this whole thing. Even though Scott and Sarah were no longer together, Scott still lived in the Walker home. In fact, Scott decided to turn things up a notch and set rules for Sarah while she was dating Chris. This man, I don't even have words. But according to Scott, Sarah was only allowed to stay over at Chris's house 2 days a week. Also, Chris was never allowed to stay over at the Walker house. Now that rule, I get that one. It's Scott's house too. At least I think. But to tell someone who isn't your wife, who isn't your partner, she's literally nothing but a roommate to you at this point, when she can and can't see her boyfriend, that's just beyond the realm of understanding. Well, fast forward to July 17th of 2020, at around 10 p.m. Scott drove Bea to his parents' house in Warrington. Bea was wearing all black clothes with a blue denim jacket and black thick-framed glasses. During the ride, Scott confiscated Bea's phone, but we don't know why he did this. And according to Scott's parents, Bea was visibly upset when she arrived at their home. Anyway, Bea went on to sleep at around 1 a.m. And on the morning of July 18th at about 10:25 a.m., Scott came to pick Bea up to take her back home. But Bea never made it home. According to Scott, he'd made a small stop to have a cigarette near Skater's Way when Bea flung open the car door and took off. Scott tried to follow her, but he couldn't catch up, and in the end, he just went back home. When Sarah saw Scott returning home, she noticed that he was exhausted and was on the verge of breaking into tears, but she didn't think much of it. Remember, she couldn't have cared less about him at this point. But what was alarming about all of this was that Sarah, Bea's own mother, didn't report her daughter missing until 3 days later, even though she noticed that she hadn't come home with Scott almost immediately. This is not normal behavior coming from a mother. When a child goes missing, the parents, especially mothers, report it to the police right away. What took Sarah so long in reporting her own daughter missing? And what happened during those 3 days? Well, a lot of things happened, and we're about to find out that B was truly helpless. No one was there for her, not even her own mother. In the years that have passed since this case unfolded, some pretty haunting details have emerged. B was very clearly suffering. Not only was she raised in a household with a violent father, but her mother was also all but absent from her life. We don't know if this was simply by choice or because she was trying to raise 10 children, but either way, it is inexcusable. B was suffering from the unimaginable, and infuriatingly, the main perpetrator was someone she called Dad. It turns out, behind Sarah's back, B was being taken advantage of by Scott in a nightmare that spanned nearly 7 years. But sadly, that wasn't all. B thought that she could turn to her other parent, her own mother, for security and comfort. But B was proven wrong again. When she came clean with her mother about what Scott had been doing to her, her mother didn't believe her. She called her own daughter a liar. Mind you, this is coming from a man who openly abused his family, openly was having an affair with multiple other women, and he was even openly abusive to his previous family. But you don't believe he has it in him to take advantage of a young girl? Now, I try my best to maintain composure when presenting these cases, but what a freaking moron. What a disgrace and a wholehearted waste of breath. When you become a parent, your whole world changes. Your whole job on this planet is to take care of your children. Always love them, always believe them, always protect them. But this disgusting excuse of a mother chose to do nothing. If all this wasn't bad enough, B's mother ended their conversation by telling B she would literally kill her if she ever told anyone else about this. It is so nauseating that Sarah would rather stand up for a narcissistic, abusive man whom she had plans of leaving anyway, instead of her own daughter. What a wasted parenthood. But things didn't end there. As soon as Sarah made the call to report her daughter missing, 3 days after B apparently ran away, the operator was asked some basic questions, whose answers were already very suspicious. Apparently, Sarah had received a text from B saying that she was staying with her ex-boyfriend, Luke, after she had run away. But the operator was baffled that Sarah or Scott hadn't gotten in contact with or even visited Luke in order to see B. The operator immediately knew something was fishy. Regardless, the detectives began searching for B in neighboring areas. Police conducted searches in Gunthorpe, Newborough, and other parts of Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. But sadly, there was no sign of B. Another thing that investigators did that eventually pulled the curtain off the ruse Scott and Sarah were pulling was checking their phones. And boy, did they find a lot of strange things. First, Scott's phone activity was very weird and all over the place on July 18th. See, he had turned his phone off after he picked up B from his parents' house, and this was at about 11:23 a.m. to 12:54 p.m. And cell phone activity also showed him, as well as Sarah, going to a specific place multiple times after B was reported missing. It was a lock-up garage owned by his parents in Walton. Alarmingly, Scott also made a stop there the day that he was supposed to take B back home from his parents' house. The detectives immediately went out to search this lock-up garage, and even though they didn't find B, they did find something of hers, a backpack. This backpack was immediately taken in as evidence, and what officers found inside gave them an idea of how much trouble B was in. See, B always kept a diary and wrote in it ever since she was young. But there was one journal entry that shocked the police, and it said, quote, "Told my mom about my dad and the abuse. She called me a liar and threatened to kill me if I told the police. What kind of parent wouldn't believe their daughter?" It's so heartbreaking to see B's sadness emanating from these words in her diary. She truly believed that Sarah would be on her side, but she was proven detrimentally wrong. But the detectives weren't done looking. They also decided to reach out to B's friends and ask about Scott's abuse, and most of them came forward with more details. According to one of B's friends, Warren Naylor, B had confided in him about Scott taking advantage of her. But Warren later pointed out that on July 19th, a day after B had apparently run away, he received a message from her on Instagram which said that she had lied about the abuse. But remember, Scott had confiscated Bee's phone on the route to his parents' house. Bee didn't have access to her phone, so how could she text her friends or even her mom, Sarah, about staying over at Luke's? Well, this was another point where the case took an unbelievable turn. Investigators, after some digging, found out that the messages being sent to Sarah and Bee's friends were from Bee's phone, but she obviously wasn't the sender. It was actually Sarah, her own mother. It was speculated that Scott, after learning that Bee had told her mother about the disgusting actions he'd been taking part in, lost his temper and attacked Bee and ended her life on the way back to her home from his parents' house. Scott didn't want his dirty laundry to be aired out and get him kicked out of the home, so he decided to take Bee out of the picture. But that wasn't all. Remember that Scott's phone was turned off for quite some time? Well, it's alleged that Scott took Bee's life during this time, a period of about 91 minutes, and disposed of her body somewhere miles away from home. Afterwards, the first call that he made was to Sarah. Even though no one knows what was said in that call, it was 9 minutes long, and the police speculated that it was them discussing their plan to cover up Bee's murder. It's so heartless and unimaginable. But the thing is, Scott's actions were heinous no matter how you look at it. But what about Sarah? Didn't she feel even an ounce of guilt discussing a cover-up for her own daughter's murder over the phone with the very person who so viciously took her life? It's so chilling to think that Sarah went along with the whole plan of sending messages from Bee's phone to make it look like she was in contact with her friends and family, but in reality, it was actually Scott and Sarah's own doing. This proves just how little Bee's own mother actually cared for her, which is nearly impossible to understand. With all of this evidence, along with statements from Bee's friends and brother, Anthony, about Scott's abuse and him recording everyone in the house, both Scott and Sarah were arrested on September 14, 2020, on charges of murder and perverting the course of justice. The detectives were still looking for Bee's body, but sadly, they've been unsuccessful, and to this day, Bee has never been found. Something definitely happened to Bee. But if there wasn't a body, then how could a murder trial be successful? Well, the evidence against Scott and Sarah was just too damning, and coupled with the terrible abuse that Bee was enduring, there was a very clear motive for Scott. The trial mainly consisted of statements from Bee's friends about Scott taking advantage of her, even though Scott had the audacity to deny everything. When asked about the hidden cameras in the house and in the bathroom, Scott shockingly stood by his baseless stance of catching Bee in the act of hiding candy in the bathroom. But knowing what we know now, I think it's pretty clear to see why Scott put cameras in that bathroom. Another thing that the police came across was a Facebook post when Bee had changed her relationship status from single to in a relationship with Luke. Now, there was nothing wrong with the post itself, but there was a very weird comment left under it. This makes me want to throw up even repeating the words, but Scott left a comment under the relationship status saying, quote, "Any boy who kisses you better have the image of me in your head." He even included a black and white picture of himself attached to the comment. Even after this revelation, Scott continued to deny everything and still maintained that Bee simply ran away from the car on their way home. Sarah, on the other hand, was a bit more cooperative during the investigation, and she did admit to sending out texts from Bee's phone pretending to be her. But obviously that plan failed pretty quickly because the texts didn't sound like Bee at all. They lacked her personality, and also the U-turn that Bee made about lying about Scott taking advantage of her was so bizarre. Anyone who read it knew that the texts weren't from Bee. Top this with the 3-day wait before officially reporting Bee missing, and so many holes in their stories just don't add up. Even without being able to prove that Scott took Bee's life, and without ever finding Bee's body, the jury finally reached a verdict. In 2021, almost a year after Bee went missing, the Cambridge Crown Court found Scott Walker guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Another factor that was included in Scott's sentence was his uncooperativeness in disclosing information about Bee's body. Due to this, the prisoner's disclosure of Information About Victims Act of 2020, better known as Helen's Law, was passed in November of 2020, and it was applicable in Scott's case. Helen's Law basically forbids criminals from getting released on bail if they don't disclose information about where they disposed of a victim's body. When Scott's trial and sentencing was over, all that was left was Sarah. She was also tried in court, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge her for B's murder. It was unclear if she had known about Scott's terrible plan before it was carried out, but she was found guilty on the count of perverting the course of justice, similar to Scott, and she was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Sadly, more than 3 years later, Bernadette's body has still not been found, and no one besides Scott knows what happened to her. The police searched and combed through different areas and even employed the use of drones, searching equipment, and canine units. But tragically, nothing came up. The detective on B's case, Detective Justine Jenkins, said, quote, "We may never know the truth about what Scott did and why, but we do know Bernadette had made allegations of abuse against him." B's brother, Anthony, fought till the end to find answers about why his sister's life was taken so suddenly and so barbarically. He's still hopeful that the detectives will be able to locate B so that he can get a proper goodbye. But on December 22nd, 2023, the air around HM Prison in Full Sutton felt strangely cleaner than usual. Turns out that's because there was one less scumbag breathing it, as Scott passed away that day at the age of 53. The only unfortunate thing about his passing is that this officially means there's zero chance of investigators learning where B's remains were hidden. Why Scott didn't disclose information on where B's body was is still unclear. It may be that he still wanted some kind of control over B's grieving siblings, and he wanted to get the last word in. I genuinely have a hard time wrapping my head around just how horrible, how awful, and how gross this disgusting man was. I mean, you already lost. You already got caught. You got charged. You got convicted. Just give it up and tell your family where B is. It's very clear at this point, Scott was only withholding the information because he knew how much it would hurt B's siblings. B was a gifted photographer who tried her best to see the good in everyone, even to the person who practically ruined and then ended her life. She still respected him as a father. This is one of those cases that just sucks. I just wish there was something we could do. Sarah is due to be released from prison in 2027, and who knows how this will pan out for the other 9 people she gave birth to. I hope with everything I have that this awful woman was able to turn her life around while behind bars, but I've just got to be honest this time. I don't think there's any coming back from the awful person that she was and probably still is. Redemption is always possible, but let's be clear that sometimes... Guys, I don't know if you've ever been the victim of this type of abuse or if you're currently trapped in this type of situation, but do not reach out to family. Do not reach out to friends. Reach out to the police. You can find help. There are people who will believe you, and it's always best if you can provide some tiny shred of evidence to help the police as well. But even if you can't, reach out. It is never too soon, but B is such a terrible example that it can always be too late. Do not let this happen to you. And if you know of someone who's in a similar situation, don't dare let this continue. Step up. At the end of it all, I just hope that B's siblings are okay. And I hope they're able to move on from this because at the end of the day, sometimes that's all we can do is just try to move on. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Candy Crooker and Daniel Silva. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you'll gain access to new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public, and it's currently the best way you can support the channel and help out, and I really appreciate all of you that have decided to do that. If you want to join, you can click that big join button below the video or find the link down in the description. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered, and don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and keeps you up to date with all of my future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. After graduating high school early, Kylie Rodney headed off to a celebration with friends in the Tahoe National Forest. In the early morning hours of August 6th, 2022, investigators say she left a campground party and was never seen again. Kylie was smart and talented, with a loving family and lots of friends. She was looking forward to starting college in the next few weeks and was happy to spend some time with her friends before saying her goodbyes. No one knew that some simple fun at a campground so close to home could end so badly. Locals and law enforcement alike showed up in strong numbers to locate Kylie, but no one could be prepared for what they found. Friday, August 5th, 2022, was a beautiful day in the Tahoe National Forest, hosting clear views of Mount Shasta in the distance. Wildflowers were blooming, following the wildfires of summers past, dotting the landscape with purple and yellow hues. Summertime was ending, and people were squeezing in the last few days of seasonal fun before heading back to school. Kylie Rodney had just graduated high school early and with honors, and that's no easy feat. She was due to attend Sierra College in the coming weeks, and her family couldn't have been more proud. On Friday, August 5th, she spent time with her friends making creme brulee, and later she had plans to take part in a summer send-off party at Prosser Campground, which is about a 45-minute drive from Reno, not far from the state line, but it was only about 15 minutes from Kylie's home. Prosser Campground is located on a large reservoir and is commonly known to locals as the Sanctuary. This was the perfect place for friends to have one last hurrah before going off to college for new adventures. The following morning, around 9 a.m. on August 6th, Kylie had made plans to meet her closest friends, but she never showed. It would turn out that Friday, August 5th, is the last day anyone saw Kylie. Kylie was born and raised in Truckee, California. Her parents, Lindsay and Daniel, were loving and dedicated parents. She also had an 8-year-old brother who thought that she was the best person on earth. Kylie and her family lived in a more rural area of Truckee, and some would describe it as more off-grid, although many locals in the mountain towns of California lived this way. For Kylie, this was just her ordinary way of life. She was known for being a very happy person, so it was clear that her more off-grid lifestyle was panning out great for her. As the weekend finally rolled around, Kylie couldn't have been more excited to attend the campground party with her friends. At around 6 p.m. on the 5th of August, Kylie set out towards the party, with their parents never realizing they would never see their daughter again. Shortly after 6 p.m. on the 5th, Kylie goes into a gas station in Truckee, about halfway between her home and the party's location, where surveillance cameras captured footage of her browsing the store. A couple hours later, close to 10 p.m., Kylie arrives at the campground with her friend Magdalene, and she then links up with another friend, Sammy Smith. Sammy and Kylie spend most of their time at the party together, sharing drinks and breaking off briefly to chat with others. While this was supposed to be a tight-knit gathering of local teens, word about this campground party traveled fast, and soon people from all over Northern California were making their way to Prosser to attend. Reports state that anywhere from 200 to 300 people were in attendance that night. Due to the tendency for wildfires in this area, the partygoers could not light a bonfire, meaning that unless there were other sources of light, the area was pitch black. It's been said that many people used glow sticks, electric lanterns, and their headlights to illuminate the area. Kylie and her group of friends had, of course, attended parties like this before. Kylie's mom trusted her daughter and had told news outlets that she never, ever drank and drove. Kylie was both smarter than that and incredibly responsible. Kylie's friends have backed up the statement, saying they never saw Kylie drink at a party and then drive afterward. Thus, Lindsay had no qualms about letting Kylie attend. At around 11 p.m., the girls walked to Kylie's silver Honda CR-V to charge Kylie's phone. They sat there and talked for some time, sharing a few drinks, and part of the conversation included Sammy asking for a ride home that evening. At around 11:30 p.m., Lindsay says she received a text from Kylie, saying she was about to leave the party and was headed straight home. Lindsay, who witnessed Kylie's hard work to graduate early with honors, trusted her daughter to be home when she said she would be there. She had no doubt in her mind that Kylie would be home shortly. Lindsay texted her back, telling Kylie to be safe and that she loved her. Kylie's response was, "Okay, I love you too." Between 11:30 p.m. and 12:20 a.m., Sammy decides that Kylie is too intoxicated to drive her home and arranges for another ride. The two girls parted ways, Sammy telling authorities that she said her goodbyes with Kylie at about 12:25 a.m. Minutes later, at 12:36, Sammy explained that she received another call from Kylie inquiring about her ride. Sammy says she could hear talking in the background, so she believed Kylie to still be at the party, but she couldn't be sure. Unbeknownst to Sammy, this would be the last time anyone spoke to Kylie. Lindsay woke up the next morning to discover that Kylie was not in her room and that her vehicle was not parked outside. After she'd been unable to get a hold of her after a few calls, she instantly phoned the police and reported that Kylie was missing. But the police didn't issue an Amber Alert immediately. They said that there was no evidence that Kylie had been abducted. They went to the area where the party was held to conduct a search and interviewed about 1/3 of the partygoers. Investigators urged more people who attended the party to come forward, but many of the attendees were skeptical about speaking with authorities. Most of them were about to start college and were fearful that the repercussions from their activities at the party would ruin their future in some way. The police were vocal about the fact that no one would be in any trouble for things that happened at the party. They just wanted to find Kylie. But this wasn't enough to sway the minds of the partygoers. Most of them remained tight-lipped.
I can't.
Word traveled fast about Kylie's disappearance, but despite there being over 200 people in attendance, no one reported seeing anything.
Is that Kylie?
Yet both Kylie and her vehicle were missing. How is this possible? Surely someone would have seen something. Sammy decided to host a meeting with everyone who attended the party that night. No detectives were allowed at this meeting, in hopes that speaking with peers and friends would put them more at ease. But still, nothing new came from it. Sammy told authorities several times that she was the last person to see Kylie. Sammy and other girlfriends of Kylie were vocal about the pushy older guys that were creeping them out at the party. And this is when Sammy and the other friends decided to leave. This caused many people to raise their eyebrows. Why would a group of girlfriends leave one friend behind if they knew that she'd been drinking and that there were older men in attendance who were making these young girls feel uneasy? Even though Sammy reported that there were hundreds of photos and videos from that night, not a single one gave any evidence to Kylie's state of mind or whereabouts. Police were simply at a loss. Finally, days after Kylie's initial disappearance, investigators were able to confirm the last time her phone connected to cellular data was at 12:33 a.m., which would have been about the time she spoke with Sammy on the phone. So whatever happened just seconds after that call, well, it couldn't have been good. Police now had their first and only lead, and the search for Kylie was on. Sammy quickly became crucial to the investigation, having spent so much time with Kylie the night she disappeared, and she went on to do several media interviews. When asked about an interview about what she believed happened to her friend, Sammy says she thinks that, quote, somebody knew she was drunk, offered to give her a ride home, but didn't give her a ride home. Another initial theory is that she crashed somewhere along the way home. The area is mountainous, and the roads can be difficult to navigate, especially if you're an inexperienced driver who's been drinking and it's the middle of the night. For any of you who may not have ever driven through the mountains, let me just say, some of these mountain roads can be hard to navigate even in broad daylight. Adding drinks into the mix as well as the darkness of night, well, it's a recipe for disaster. Sammy Smith cooperated with the investigation, as did Kylie's reported ex-boyfriend, Jagger. But media interviews with Sammy and Jagger presented the public with discrepancies. Speculation circulated about the relationship between Kylie, Sammy, and Jagger. Many reported that Sammy and Kylie were not as close as Sammy had led the police to believe. At the time of her disappearance, Kylie and Sammy weren't even friends on social media, but internet sleuths discovered that Sammy and Jagger were. When Sammy and Jagger requested via social media that all in-person leads be directed to them instead of the authorities so that they could, quote, filter information, well, many started to get the feeling that something much more sinister had occurred. This, coupled with what many believed to be suspicious behavior, led to the belief that the girl claiming to be friends with Kylie may have had something to do with her disappearance. Following Jagger's public request that he be contacted with leads, the Placer County Sheriff's Department released a statement via Twitter on August 11th, saying that they never instructed Jagger to collect witness testimony. They emphasized that all information be relayed directly to them. This only increased public suspicion around Jagger and Sammy. As photo and video footage from the party started surfacing, it was sent over to be reviewed by the authorities. By August 12, 2022, the search for Kylie intensified. Authorities and volunteers extensively searched her last known location as well as her home, looking for anything that might have led them to finding Kylie. In a town hall meeting the week after her disappearance, the Placer County Sheriff's Office outlined their extensive searches. Officials told news outlets that they'd searched as far north as Sierraville and as far east as Verde. To the south, they searched all around Truckee and extended beyond the Jackson Meadows Reservoir to the west, about a 25-mile radius from her last known location. People from the area volunteering in the search explained they didn't believe Kylie or her car was still in the Tahoe National Forest, which stretches over 800,000 miles. This is a vast and scenic area with a diverse landscape ranging from rugged peaks and dense forest to immaculate lakes and rivers. Kylie could have been anywhere, but the search team felt confident that if she was in that forest, they would have found her by now. Due to conflicting information about Kylie's relationships with Jagger, Sammy, and other partygoers, many were left thinking the worst, but hoping for the best. All the while, authorities continued to piece things together bit by bit. At a press conference on August 12th, law enforcement informed the public that they'd received reports from people inside the community that there was an adult dissuading people from coming forward, prompting officials to open a 100% anonymous online portal where people could submit photos, videos, and other information concerning Kylie's disappearance. By this point, the case was just getting downright bizarre. It seemed exceedingly clear that someone knew something, and they were going to every possible effort to make sure that this information didn't get out. By August 13th, law enforcement held another press conference where Public Information Officer Angela Musala explained that they had ramped up their search for the weekend. She explained that on August 12th, there was a potential burial site that was located near the campground that had been found by search and rescue ground teams in the area. She continued, saying that Kylie's family was notified, and the FBI responded to the scene, accompanied by the Placer and Nevada County Sheriff's offices, where upon further examination, they uncovered the remains of a dog. Angela went on to address the audience by saying, "Let me be clear. We have one team, one mission, and one goal, and that's to find Kylie Rodney." As the 9th day of the missing person investigation came to an end, the Placer County Sheriff's Office continued to follow up on 720 leads, looking for a single tip to lead them in the right direction. Meanwhile, people across the nation continued to speculate about what happened to Kylie, sitting on the edge of their seats waiting for the next clue. Occam's razor says that it's usually the simplest answer, but with an accident looking less and less likely with each passing day, what's the next simplest answer? What else could possibly cause someone to vanish without a trace from a crowded party? For a little over 2 weeks, Kylie's family had to go to sleep each night, not knowing where their precious daughter was, and her friends faced accusations from strangers all across the nation. And police worked tirelessly to find this missing girl. But then, a breakthrough. On August 21st, 2022, search and rescue YouTubers Adventures with Purpose pulled Kylie Rodney's silver CRV from the Prosser Reservoir. Adventures with Purpose is a YouTube channel that focuses primarily on cold cases. They specialize in underwater recoveries. When Kylie initially went missing, many familiar with their recoveries requested they join the search for the missing girl, and the team were happy to oblige. AWP states that a law enforcement agency reached out to them and asked for their help. Yet when they arrived, they were told that the lake had already been extensively searched with dive teams and there was nothing there. The search began in Prosser Reservoir at 10:40 a.m. on August 21st. They launched 2 sonar boats, one of which located an object at 11:15 a.m., 55 feet offshore and in only 14 feet of water, using a specialized Garmin sonar device. Nick, one of the divers, entered the water and confirmed the vehicle was the one belonging to Kylie Rodney by matching the license plate. A diver was sent down, and unfortunately, he found a body inside the cargo area of the vehicle. According to Adventures with Purpose, the Garmin EchoMap Ultra that they used to locate the vehicle cost around $2,500, a small investment for a police force of this size. It appears to be a solid investment for search and rescue teams. So if this technology is crucial for underwater searches, and a simple YouTube channel managed to purchase one, why are search and rescue teams in the area not using it? The FBI must have had the latest technology, so why were they unable to find the vehicle in the 2 weeks they helped local agencies in the search? After making the discovery, AWP made a Facebook post about the recovery mission. The team maintains that they reached out to law enforcement first, as they were working with them to locate Kylie. But at the press conference the following day, the spokesperson for the sheriff's department stated that AWP never reached out to them, and that the police had to go out of their way to contact the team. Due to the amazing reputation of AWP, people have been skeptical about this information, with some believing that local law enforcement were just embarrassed by their oversight. The discovery of Kylie's vehicle was devastating to her family and the community. But even worse was when police made the haunting announcement: the body found in the back of the car was, unfortunately, Kylie. Most would assume that this would be the end of it, case closed. But things continued to get weirder from here, as people began to question local law enforcement about their efforts in finding Kylie. Doug and Nick of Adventures with Purpose stressed that they have a unique and rare skill set, and that aiding police agencies in this way is an honor. They acknowledged their support for law enforcement across the U.S., including the FBI. But as the news of the discovery surfaced, many people following the case began to wonder: how could the men from Adventures with Purpose do in less than 2 hours what several agencies, large and small, couldn't accomplish in 2 weeks? Adventures with Purpose discovered Kylie's vehicle upside down in an area that had been, quote, extensively searched by authorities. This led many to question the competence of local law enforcement, and rightfully so, especially since a trail camera in the area shows that at 12:32 a.m. on August 6th, a vehicle drove straight into the water where Kylie was found, and at the exact location where her cell phone last pinged. The local police department said that they'd spent over 15,000 man-hours searching for Kylie, only for another team to come in and find her in less than 2 hours, in the same spot where her phone last pinged. Aerial views of the location clearly show something in the water where they recovered her body. So if there were air searches conducted, how was this missed? If she drove her vehicle into the water, it should have driven through the sand. How were those tracks missed when her mom reported her missing the very next morning, less than 12 hours after she'd vanished? Doug Bishop from AWP went on to state in an interview that he found the circumstances extremely suspicious. He cites many of the things already discussed: that she was highly intelligent, on her way to college, and disappears from a large party only to be found a few hundred yards away. He explains that it isn't possible that Kylie went the wrong way down the road. He explains that this road was one way in and one way out, not to mention a road that she was very familiar with. Yet, the road her vehicle ended up on had a very hard, sharp left turn onto a rough dirt road that requires four-wheel drive. Essentially, whether she was drunk or not, Kylie would have known immediately she wasn't going the right way, making her crash even more suspicious. Doug Bishop explains that where she was found within the vehicle, in the cargo compartment, was also suspicious, and that the whole thing just doesn't add up. The fact that no one is willing to talk is a huge red flag and adds to this suspicion. While this very well could be an accident, there are many inconsistencies in this story. Her friend stated that she seemed too drunk to drive and reported strange men at the party, but had no problem leaving her there alone. She clearly and coherently texted her mother, yet 30 minutes later was too inebriated to know that she was going the wrong way down a road that she'd traveled many times before. Law enforcement searched extensively, but couldn't locate a vehicle that was clearly seen from aerial cameras. It just doesn't add up. Bishop also says that it's suspicious that Kylie was located in the cargo area of the vehicle. He explains that had the windows been up, Kylie would have had the time to crawl back there. But why would she do that?
Why, Kylie?
Well, we don't know. But the thing is, when the vehicle was recovered, multiple windows were rolled down. This means the vehicle would have filled with water so quickly that she wouldn't have had time to maneuver back there. And why would she? She could so easily have maneuvered out the window to safety. The fact that she became stuck in the back of the car just makes no logical sense whatsoever. News reports claim that over 400 people pass away each year in their cars from being trapped in water. Your best chance of survival is to get out of the car before it's fully submerged. Most cars, when driven into the water, are fully submerged in less than a minute, so every second counts. Experts explain that your best bet is to get the windows down as soon as possible and escape through the front windows, not the rear. But in Kylie's case, this raises more questions. Kylie's driver window, along with the other windows, appeared to have been down when the vehicle was pulled from the water. yet it's been reported that she was located in the backmost part of the vehicle. Furthermore, the driver's side mirror was broken off and there was a dent in the driver's side door, and neither of these appear to have been there when she left her home that evening. So where did this damage come from? Footage of several other vehicles that were recovered from the water show no damage to mirrors or doors. So what happened to Kylie's vehicle? If there were over 200 people in attendance, how did no one hear the vehicle go into the water? While there's so much that's still unknown, Kylie's autopsy report soon revealed the truth of this case. And it's a truth that many of us are unlikely to accept. The autopsy report was released on Thursday, October 13th, 2022, in which the cause of Kylie's passing was declared as an accident. The official report claims that she drowned. Locals find this conclusion surprising, to put it mildly. They cite suspicions due to the chief of police and the coroner being one and the same. They say that many crimes in the area are covered up or declared an accident because this is a tourist location, and having a reputation for crime would be bad for the local economy, and I second this notion. In fact, this is one of the main reasons my wife and I left our hometown. In the few months before we packed up and moved, we personally spotted firsthand 3 crime scenes where people had lost their lives. One beside an apartment complex, one in a ditch on the side of a major highway, and another where the location escapes me at the moment, but not one of these crimes was ever officially documented. They were all covered up because the town was a tourist destination. The money from tourism is what kept the city afloat, and they couldn't risk losing all that money. The autopsy report says that Kylie was fully dressed and there was no evidence of any assault. The toxicology report showed caffeine, nicotine, and a minuscule amount of THC were in Kylie's system. Liver tissue samples taken showed that there was an alcohol level in her system of 0.08, right at the legal limit to drive. But many experts claim that these ethanol levels in her system were likely the result of the decomposition process. This leaves people questioning if Kylie was drunk at all. Roads in the area are not lit with street lamps. They're winding dirt paths that aren't well marked. It is possible, despite Kylie having been to this area many times, she took a wrong turn and drove herself directly into the water. But if so, what prevented her from climbing out an already open window? The most interesting element of the autopsy report is that there was virtually no water in her lungs. A medical examiner explained that the lung weights were surprisingly low for a case of water inhalation. One would expect that if a person passed away from drowning, there would be a lot of water in their lungs, but there wasn't nearly enough to conclude such a thing. Detective Sunnier reported that because there was no evidence of foul play, the manner of her passing had to be listed as accidental. I don't know about you, but to me, this just means that the team didn't dig deep enough to find the evidence they needed. I mean, heck, they clearly have a track record for this. Her vehicle was found in a spot they claim to have searched multiple times. In the end, there's a hole in the lives of Kylie's friends and family that will never be filled. Worse yet, they've never even been able to find out for certain what happened to Kylie that day. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be able to let this situation rest until I had some proven answers. But despite this incredibly heavy loss, I just hope this serves as a remarkably valuable lesson to never leave a friend behind.
Bye, Kylie.
This tragedy could have been avoided, but from it, there are lessons to be learned. For law enforcement, for partygoers, and for the true crime community. Kylie didn't have to lose her life that night, but I sincerely hope that the story of her loss may, in some way, help prevent others from meeting the same fate. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. If you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered, and don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and keeps you up to date with all of my future videos. You can also click that join button below to support the channel and see new videos long before everyone else does. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.
My last match. Let's fight together.
Ngại kia. Anh hả?
Là trên MacBook thì tự nhiên không có để thực hiện.
Đây anh, máy em dùng hết rồi. Máy em dùng hết rồi.
Thôi thì nếu mà rảnh em về nhà làm cái máy cũng được ấy. Tối thì xem thêm luôn, làm thêm luôn. Thì em cứ tập trung cái kia đi nhé. Để anh làm.
Không làm buổi chiều tối cả, nhưng mai tối em chơi thì sao?
Để anh làm.
Ok, anh làm. Ghép đi.
Em có yêu cầu cả.
Đúng.
Sao đấy đâu.